Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Share this video out to the world, and I thank you very much for your support. The Dragon Ball community celebrates 30 years of Dragon Ball being on television. And on this video, I want to talk about the 10 things that the Dragon Ball anime did better than Dragon Ball Z. Hello there, beautiful friends from around the world. I'll be your host, Geekdom, and joining me on this video to count down 10 things the Dragon Ball anime did better than DBZ. Please welcome Blackened Fist.
It's good to be here, and I'm here to also bring my own thoughts and opinions.
Yes, indeed. Now, obviously, Blackened Fist, as you and I have gone on record of saying many times, in the manga, in the original manga, there was no Dragon Ball Z. There's 42 volumes of the manga that came out in Shonen Jump from 84 to 95, and the series was changed to Dragon Ball Z only in the anime by Toei. But if you were to read the original manga, it's just Dragon Ball. So I want to specify that we're talking about 10 things that Dragon Ball the anime did better than Dragon Ball Z. So what is your number 5 or your first out of the 5 that you've got?
At number 5, I have the opening. Now, the opening for Dragon Ball is my definitive number 1 favorite opening in the entire franchise, whether I'm counting like openings to animes like Dragon Ball Z or GT or Super even, or whether I'm counting openings, animated 2D openings like the video games, like most prominently like maybe the Budokai 2, 3, Ultimate Tenkaichi also had one. But as an opening to anything, the first Dragon Ball opening is my favorite, not only in terms of the visuals, but the song itself. The song Mystical Adventure, Maka Fushigi Adventure, is definitively my favorite song in the entire franchise. I like it better than Hechala. I like it better than We Gotta Power. I like it better than Don Don. I like it better than any other video game theme, as much as I love those. This one takes the cake in my eyes.
And I love that song too, no question about it. I used to bump that song every single day in high school when I downloaded it from Vegito EX's links page way back.
I also have to say that in the Shinsuke Kikuchi soundtrack, there were many rearrangements and instrumentations of that song, and in Dragon Ball throughout the whole entire series. I believe that one of the very few last times that song was used,
first two movies, yes.
Yeah, there was like some sort of rearrangement, but that song, even Shinsuke Kikuchi did great things with that theme song. I pretty much love all the rearrangements and little instrumentations that Shinsuke Kikuchi did with that theme song. So that theme song just sticks out so much, not only as a song, but throughout the whole soundtrack.
It is legendary without question. Now, my number 5 of the 10 things that Dragon Ball did better than DBZ is less plot holes and inconsistencies. I felt that even though Dragon Ball does have plot holes no matter what, even in the manga, I felt that by the time we got to the Z portion, with the added filler arcs and with the added I guess anime only extras, they added more contradictions and more plot holes. I feel like Dragon Ball is a much tighter story without Z in there. I feel like, and we'll get to more about the arc later on, but I feel like the story had less room for error, so to speak, and I felt like Toriyama, especially when we got to the Buu Saga where the power scaling was totally out of whack, I felt that everything in Dragon Ball for the most part actually made a lot of sense. I think DBZ kind of became more about the moments than about the actual story. So what is your number 4?
My number 4 has to go to the training. Now there was some, the training at Dragon Ball could be lackluster at some times, and of course there was awesome training in Dragon Ball Z, of course. But the reason I really pick training in this spot, and the reason I think the Dragon Ball training is better, is because it's just more creative. Too many times in Dragon Ball Z, the training was shoved off aside. It was something that got in the way of telling the story. It was probably one of the biggest examples of this was the hyperbolic time chamber, Room of Spirit and Time, because in that whole instance, it was a way to really speed up training and shove it aside. Even though we got glimpses into how that training went, a lot of times it was done off screen. a lot of times the training was shoved aside. While in Dragon Ball, the two most prominent examples I want to give is, of course, the Master Roshi training that Goku and Krillin received in the beginning of the series, which was incredibly creative. Doing their milk run, them just doing menial tasks. Do channeling a little bit of Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid there. But also, also have to say probably my favorite training sequence in the entire series is as in Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. This is my favorite training in everything, has to be when Goku went up to Kami's lookout for the very first time and was trained by Mr. Popo. That training was incredible. It was not only creative, he did so many unique things in that training. It was part of the story, it was part of his growth. It was not something that was just brushed aside, but it really gave Goku just so much more depth into what the character he was going to become, to the kind of strength that he would possess. And I just have to say that for the most part, the Dragon Ball training was more part of the story. It was more intrinsic, and it was not as brushed over as it sometimes would be in Z. Now, of course, becoming stronger in Dragon Ball sometimes was being brushed over a little bit, like, for instance, Goku drinking that super holy water in the Demon King Piccolo arc. But for the most part, Dragon Ball did make training more in part of the series.
I agree with you. The Roshi training and the Popo training are probably the two best examples of training in the whole series, in my opinion, better than Z. I completely agree. My number 4 goes along with that one. Emphasis on spiritualism and mysticism. I felt like Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama took all of the concepts from Dragon Ball and essentially made them into sci-fi. Goku being a monkey boy, Demon King Piccolo being a demon, the concept of God having to release his demonic force from inside of him, Goku having to climb Korin Tower. All of these things were great moments in Dragon Ball. And in Dragon Ball Z, a lot of them are explained through sci-fi. Well, Goku's an alien, Piccolo's an alien, they go into space. I think Dragon Ball, not just with the training that Goku did with Kami, with Karin, with all the people, and Roshi, learning how to manipulate his ki, learning life lessons in all the tournaments, which we're going to get to soon. I felt like with Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama tried to make it all sci-fi and give everything an explanation, whereas I like the mysticism and the spirituality of Dragon Ball. I think it felt more like the series had more of a genuine sense of adventure. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is comedy. Now, there are hilarious moments in both, but I think that it goes without a doubt that in my mind, the comedy in Dragon Ball far surpassed Dragon Ball Z, and of course it makes sense, as Dragon Ball is a little bit more lighthearted, and honestly, also with a lot of the comedy also has to do with one character in particular, which is Master Roshi. Now, Master Roshi lost prominence throughout the series, and of course, when you get rid of a funny character such as that, your whole series is going to become less funny. But I felt that the comedy and just the funny moments, even in the first arc, like with even Kid Goku, Goku himself was a funny character with his whole little pat, or the infamous "you have no balls" scene. Just crazy antics. Of course, with Master Roshi. One of the funniest moments I can remember was in the Red Ribbon Army arc. Master Roshi taking control of this camera that Bulma made to keep an eye on Goku, and him thinking that he was spying on him thinking that he was spying on a lady taking her clothes off, when he only discovers it was a guy taking a shit, and then him throwing up. I mean, that kind of stuff, you just don't see that kind of stuff in Dragon Ball. The closest it ever got to that in Dragon Ball Z was in that whole Garlic Jr. arc with Marin and everything, and then Chi-Chi showing up. I mean, that was also a hilarious moment too. But
what about when Roshi shrank himself?
Oh, there's just so many moments. There's Roshi shrank himself.
Oh, when Bulma's shirt was lifted and he had the nosebleed that covered the invisible guy?
Yeah, of course. And then there's, of course, when Bulma lifted up her to show up her panties, but she didn't even realize what she actually was showing. Or Emperor Pilaf. Oh my gosh,
he's hilarious.
How could I forget Emperor Pilaf? Emperor Pilaf, probably one of the probably in my mind the best comedic villain in the entire series. Just how he tortures his villains, and tortures his henchmen, for the slightest offense, like them, him farting and then blaming it on Shu, and then electrocuting him or threatening to chop his limbs off. I mean, stuff like that. It just makes that's part of that section of the series a lot more funny, in my opinion.
I agree with you completely. My number 3 is the tournaments. One thing I loved about Dragon Ball is you had 3 Tenkaichi Budokais, and unlike Dragon Ball Z, where you had basically the Cell game and you had the Buu Saga tournament, which had no real finish except for like the 18 Mr. Satan bribery thing, the tournaments in Dragon Ball felt like a big deal. Toriyama used them not only to cap off the arcs and to introduce the next arcs, but also he used them to build development with Goku and his friends. The first tournament ends with Goku facing off against his master, who was in disguise, losing the fight barely because Roshi was very, very, very tired, and he it could have gone to anybody, but Roshi did get the win because he's older and wiser and learning the lesson that, there's always somebody better. Then the 22nd tournament, you had the redemption of Ten Shinhan, which we're going to get to later on in this video, and also the whole rival schools thing where one of Roshi's former schoolmates or, trainees or partners or whatever has his own school, the Crane Master, and you had the Turtle versus the Crane, and you had like Yamcha, Krillin, Goku versus Ten Shinhan and Chaozu. Just amazing stuff. And then, of course,
I mean, Goku got married at a tournament.
Yeah, the 23rd tournament. I was going to get to it, where you have you have a tournament where Goku wants to be the heavyweight champion of the world, but you've also got Piccolo there, who not only wants to become the champ, but wants to rule the world and kill Goku. So there's a whole like looming atmosphere over it. I think that Dragon Ball Z was really lacking, I feel, with that whole kind of concise, structured tournament. Structure. What is your favorite tournament?
That is a really tough question, and to put me on the spot
they're
like
all
that,
awesome.
I mean, they're all amazing tournaments. I mean, if I really had to press me on that, it probably had to be between the 21st or the 23rd. I probably go toward the 21st, but they're all amazing. And maybe if I give it more thought, I might change my mind. But they're all amazing arcs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I also feel like the tournaments also allow the characters to actually have unique techniques. I thought Dragon Ball Z later on emphasized way too much on like ki blasts and mountains blowing up, whereas in Dragon Ball you had Giran with the Guru Guru gum, you had Bacterian with the bad smell, you had Yam, you had all these characters that essentially had their own kind of techniques, and they were unique and creative, and it wasn't all about ki blast. It just felt more like a real fight. Just go back and watch those tournaments, folks. What is your number 2?
My number 2 has to be the locations. Now, this has to more specifically do with fighting locations or just locations of entire arcs. And I feel that Dragon Ball by far has way more interesting and diverse locations than Dragon Ball Z. A lot of times, I mean, this is infamous for Dragon Ball Z. What happens in Dragon Ball Z? We see them go get prepared for a fight, and then they go to some wasteland or some outcrops just in the middle of
nowhere. Yeah.
Pretty much the middle of nowhere to go fight, right? And that wasn't the case with Dragon Ball. A lot of times we had the tournaments as a backdrop. In the first arc, there were so many locales that they went through.
Don't forget Penguin Village in the snow, and then
Penguin Village. Yeah, and then of course the Red Ribbon Army arc. We went from like the ice caps to tundra. It seemed all the way to
the base. Yeah,
with the locations of Dragon Ball, it just made the world feel a lot more different and alive. It made the world feel more complete. And while I'm not saying that the world definitely didn't shrink, because in Dragon Ball Z, space travel and we go to different planets and stuff, but I mean, the most prominent example in Dragon Ball Z is something like we go to planet Namek, which seems to be a whole big planet of nothing, which is what we've already been seeing, what we saw throughout the whole series on Earth
Toriyama,
anyway.
Drawing
yeah, exactly. Is what
Yes.
is what we saw on Earth pretty much this whole time. So the locations and diverse locales that we get in Dragon Ball definitely make the story a lot more interesting. And honestly, this is why I like stuff like in the movies when they do change up the scenery a little bit more than in the actual show, which is actually honestly something that Dragon Ball Z movies do something better than the actual anime, which is also locations.
In some cases, I agree. My number two is more emphasis on side characters. I feel like Dragon Ball Z, especially the fans who got into Dragon Ball through Z, they look at guys like Yamcha, Tenshin Han, Chaozu, and they think of them as jokes. And they probably were jokes in Dragon Ball Z, but in Dragon Ball, these characters all had a tremendous amount of development. You had an entire like 2 or 3 episode mini arc about launch. You had the entire Tenshin Han or Tien turn during the 22nd tournament when he has the conversation with Roshi, and Roshi's like, bro, what are you doing? Like, you're so talented. Why are you wasting your time? Like that. You had Chaozu losing at math. Like, you had all these characters that we never saw again. Nam, there's so many characters. And then also, not just those characters, but also there was more emphasis on some of the villains as well. Like Pilaf, Shu, and Mai were kind of forgotten about until Battle of Gods. Not to mention the entire Red Ribbon Army. Every one of those guys was very unique. And don't forget Uranai Baba's wacky cast of tournament competitors like the Devil Man, the Invisible Man. I thought those characters were so creative and so much fun. And we just never saw them again in Dragon Ball Z. And I thought that they were emphasized better in Dragon Ball. Not just, I feel like in Dragon Ball Z, it kind of became about Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, especially at the end of the series when they came in. It was all about the Saiyans, or the Saiyans. It was all about them. But Dragon Ball actually gave other characters more room. Krillin actually mattered. So what is your number one?
My number one, and some people might think I'm crazy when I say this, my number one choice for what Dragon Ball did better than Dragon Ball Z in anime form is filler. Now, a lot of people might say, what? But I'm going to say this right now.
I agree.
Dragon Ball, the anime, had pretty much no, in my opinion at least, maybe you guys can find a little snippet somewhere, but I'm telling you right now, as a guy who has watched it multiple times, Dragon Ball had no, I repeat, no bad filler in it. It was, at the worst, it was mediocre filler.
Yeah, there was some boring episodes, but I agree.
No, it had not, and the mediocre filler was definitely it was like the minority. The majority of the filler in Dragon Ball was interesting. It expanded the ideas and concepts in it, and quite honestly, it's sometimes outright made certain portions better than the manga, in my opinion. The most prominent example, and I keep bringing this up again and again, the first arc of Dragon Ball is definitively better, in my opinion, in the anime than the manga, and that is because of the filler. And yeah, people are going to say, oh, you're just saying that because you love Emperor Pilaf, and yeah, I am, but I'm going to say that actually having Emperor Pilaf be way more involved in that arc made that arc way better. It actually made the villains a lot more developed. You got to know them a lot better in the anime than we did in the manga, where in the manga they just show up literally at the end, almost toward the end, and we get less time to actually develop those characters.
But what about the Goku filler where he's going to all these different towns and having different adventures there? I like that.
Yeah. I also love that. Of course, there's those types of fillers that I absolutely loved. Some of the best filler standalone episodes, Goku goes to Demon Land. I don't know what the Japanese title of that one is, but a lot of those moments
the
were
time traveling
moments,
episode with Roshi, bro. That's one of my favorites.
Exactly. That's kind of stuff where we get to go see Master Mutaito, where we get to go see a younger Master Roshi. Those things that are interesting, that would interest fans, that expand the universe, that we get a better understanding of the history and maybe of the teacher that Master Roshi had. That kind of stuff was in filler, and that stuff made the Dragon Ball anime pretty much more complete, in my opinion. While in Dragon Ball Z, almost all the examples of bad filler that you could say are in Dragon Ball Z, essentially. Like I said before, and I'll say it again for the last time, Dragon Ball, in my opinion, had no bad filler.
I think the last time that we really saw really good filler was probably the Gohan training stuff during the Vegeta saga. And then after that, it just kind of became what you said. By the way, the name of that episode was Goku Goes to the Demon Realm in the Japanese version. Same, it's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like same thing. So my number one is the arc of Goku, the arc of Son Goku, the character. That's my number one thing. To me, in my opinion, that Dragon Ball did better than Dragon Ball Z. A lot of people who started watching Dragon Ball Z or who are more familiar with just Z and never went back to watch Dragon Ball or maybe only saw it once, you're not getting the entire story. Radix is not where the Dragon Ball story began. No matter how much the video games may always start there, it doesn't matter. Radix is not where the story began. And a lot of people say, oh, well, Goku never gets any development. Wrong. If you watch Dragon Ball start to finish, episodes 1 through 153, you are literally seeing the arc of Goku. When Z started, the focus became about Gohan, Piccolo had his arc, and Vegeta had his arc. And that's fine. Goku was still there. He still had some development based on his heritage. But in Dragon Ball, we had Goku start out as a monkey boy in the middle of nowhere. He has an adventure. He competes in 3 tournaments, loses 2 of them, wins the last one, and gets married at the end of the series. Grows up, becomes the champion of the world, and saves the world. And remember, Goku did not technically save the world. It wasn't like an everyday thing for Goku until the fight with Piccolo. That's when he saved the world. That's when the prophecy that Uranai Baba, actually it was Uranai Baba, I believe, who said that Goku will save the world. That prophecy did not come true until Goku beat Piccolo. So again, they're building the entire series up for Goku to eventually become the world's hero, and he does it. There's definite development for Goku. He trains with all these different masters. So to me, if you're watching the series again, watch it the right way. Dragon Ball, then Dragon Ball Z, and then if you want to continue into Dragon Ball Super, which I'm sure most of you already have, that's fine. Do you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is, of course, the correct way to view it.
All right. Well, everybody check out Black and Fist channel if you're not already subscribed to him. He puts up fantastic content, really a very unique brand of editing that a lot of people have tried to emulate, but they can't quite do it. He's one of a kind.
I'm still trying, man, and I'm not at my best yet, honestly.
That's right. You're like Goku in the 22nd Budokai. You're not quite at your best yet.
No, I'm not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go subscribe to Black and Fist and subscribe to me if you haven't, and let us know your 5 or 10, I prefer 5 though because 10 is harder to think of, things that Dragon Ball did better than Dragon Ball Z. Let us know in the comments below and I will catch you down the road.